The sound of silverware clattering against porcelain echoed through the vast dining room of the Harrington mansion. What should have been the beginning of another elegant family dinner descended into chaos within seconds. "I'm not eating this," said Oliver, the eldest son, pushing away his plate with disdain. His voice was sharp, arrogant, the kind of tone that filled the air with tension. His sister, Amelia, followed suit, folding her arms across her chest with exaggerated defiance. "It smells disgusting. Who even cooked this? Do you think we're peasants?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. Their father, Charles Harrington, CEO of the largest tech conglomerate in the country, sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his expression unreadable. His fortune was legendary, his influence feared, but his children had grown up inside a bubble of wealth so thick that reality never touched them. "Enough," Charles muttered, but his words lacked weight. The rebellion had already begun. Oliver kicked back his chair and stood, his expensive shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his eyes blazing with privilege. "I swear, I'm not touching another meal until someone proves they actually know how to cook. This is pathetic." Amelia rose beside him, tossing her golden hair over her shoulder. "Same. We'll starve before we eat this garbage." The staff shifted uneasily, exchanging nervous glances. And then, like a shadow, she appeared. Sophia Alvarez, the quiet cleaning woman, stood at the edge of the room. She had been polishing silver in silence when the argument erupted, but now all eyes turned to her. Her uniform was simple, slightly faded, and her hands bore the marks of endless labor. She wasn't supposed to be noticed, wasn't supposed to speak, but her dark eyes held a storm. "You should be careful with your words," Sophia said softly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. The entire room froze. A cleaning woman speaking out of turn was unthinkable. Oliver laughed, mocking. "Careful? Don't tell me you think you're in any position to teach us manners." Amelia sneered, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're just the maid. Stay in your place." But Sophia didn't lower her gaze. For the first time in years, she allowed her voice to be steady, firm. "You refuse to eat what's given to you because you've never known what hunger truly is. You treat food as decoration, not survival. But I know a truth you don't. And maybe, tonight, you'll learn it." Charles narrowed his eyes, leaning forward. "What truth?" Sophia's lips curved into a faint, unsettling smile. "That not everything served in this house is what it seems." The words struck like a blade. A cold silence fell, and even the air seemed to grow heavier. The chandelier's crystals shimmered as though listening to her. For a moment, it was no longer just a family dinner. It was the prelude to something else, something darker. Sophia's story within the Harrington mansion was one of invisibility. She cleaned their rooms, scrubbed their marble floors, and dusted their endless collections of art. She was invisible until this night. Her past was buried in shadows, one she carried alone. She had come from a family broken by hunger, abandoned dreams, and betrayal. Her arrival in the Harrington estate years ago was not an accident. It was survival. And tonight, her silence fractured. Charles shifted in his chair, his gaze probing, calculating. He was a man who built empires out of secrets and ambition. But this interruption unsettled him. Oliver, on the other hand, smirked. "So what now? You'll cook for us? What could you possibly know about dining in this house?" Sophia tilted her head slightly. "I know enough to show you something that might silence your arrogance." The siblings burst into laughter, their voices bouncing off the cold marble walls. But Charles did not laugh. He tapped his finger against the table, the sound measured and sharp. "If you're so confident, then prove it. Cook something tonight." The staff gasped. It was unthinkable. The cleaning woman in the kitchen? To serve the Harrington heirs? It bordered on humiliation for them. But Charles allowed it. Sophia simply nodded. As you wish. She left the dining hall in silence, her footsteps echoing like a countdown. The family returned to their seats, though neither Oliver nor Amelia touched the untouched plates before them. Their rebellion had escalated into a challenge. The kitchen was another world. Stainless steel surfaces gleamed, pots hung from racks, and the air smelled faintly of roasted herbs. The chefs eyed Sophia suspiciously as she entered, but something in her presence kept them from objecting. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing forearms strong from years of scrubbing and carrying, and she began. Her movements were deliberate, precise. She chose ingredients not with haste, but with care, her fingers brushing against vegetables, spices, and grains as if each carried a memory. The other staff whispered, "What is she doing?" "She's just the cleaner." "She's not supposed to." But Sophia ignored them. She cooked. As she worked, her mind wandered back to her childhood. A home of cracked walls, a table often empty, and siblings who went to bed hungry. Her mother's whispered prayers over pots that rarely boiled. She had learned early that food was never just sustenance. It was dignity, survival, sometimes even love. She poured all of that memory into the pan before her. Meanwhile, in the dining room, Oliver grew restless. "This is ridiculous. She's probably burning something as we speak." Amelia scrolled through her phone, smirking. "Maybe she'll poison us." "Wouldn't that be dramatic?" Charles glanced at her sharply. "Enough. Let's see what she brings." For once, the weight in his voice silenced them. Minutes passed. The clatter of utensils, the soft hiss of oil, the faint aroma creeping into the hall, all signs of something unfolding. When Sophia returned, she carried a tray with simple bowls. The children recoiled instantly. "That's it? That's what you dared to serve us?" Oliver mocked. Sophia placed the bowls gently on the table, her eyes unwavering. "It may look simple, but sometimes the greatest truths hide in what is overlooked." Inside the bowls was a thick soup, its scent earthy yet rich. Not the kind of dish the Harringtons ever ate, but something that spoke of history, struggle, resilience. Amelia wrinkled her nose. "This is peasant food." Sophia looked directly at her. "It saved lives when there was nothing else." Charles leaned forward, studying the dish, and raised his spoon slowly. The room fell silent as he tasted it. His face gave nothing away at first, but then his eyes softened, just slightly. A rare flicker of emotion. "What is this?" he asked quietly. Sophia met his gaze. "It's the meal my mother used to make when we had nothing. It's the taste of hunger turned into survival. It's the difference between arrogance and gratitude." Oliver rolled his eyes. "Spare us the poetry." But Charles did not speak. He kept eating, spoon after spoon, until the bowl was empty. The children stared at him, bewildered. And then, softly, he said, This is real food." Sophia's words lingered like a storm yet to break. The Harrington mansion had been built on wealth, power, and control. But that night, at that table, something shifted. For the first time, the invisible maid was no longer invisible. Oliver slammed his paw on the table, the sound sharp enough to rattle the silverware. "You've all lost your minds. She serves a bowl of soup, and suddenly she's a chef? This is insane." Amelia crossed her arms, visibly irritated. "Father, you're indulging her. She's trying to shame us." Charles didn't respond immediately. He stared at Sophia, his mind working in quiet calculation. He had built his empire by detecting hidden strengths in people others ignored. And right now, Sophia radiated something different, something he couldn't quite place. Finally, he said, "Arrogance blinds more than hunger. Sit down. Eat." Oliver scoffed, pushing his chair back. "I said I wouldn't eat another bite of this garbage, and I meant it." "Then you'll starve," Charles said coldly, his eyes never leaving his son's. The weight of the words made even Amelia shift uncomfortably. Charles Harrington was not known for softness, but his tone carried finality, the kind that silenced boardrooms and crushed negotiations. Still, Oliver stormed out, muttering curses under his breath. Amelia followed, though not before shooting Sophia one last venomous glare. When the room was empty except for Charles and Sophia, the silence between them thickened. The chandelier above cast long shadows across the dining table, and for the first time, Charles leaned back in his chair, studying her as though she were a puzzle. "You weren't afraid to challenge them," he said finally. Sophia lowered her eyes, her hands clasped in front of her apron. "I wasn't challenging them, sir. I was telling them the truth." Charles's lips curved into something between a smirk and a sigh. Truth is a dangerous currency in this house. Sophia met his gaze, steady, unflinching. So is arrogance. For a moment, Charles almost laughed. Not out of amusement, but because this woman, this maid, spoke words most executives in his company never dared to say to his face. And somehow that made him curious. "Tell me," he said, his voice dropping lower, "why are you really here, Sophia Alvarez?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Sophia froze, her heartbeat quickening. She had spent years making sure no one asked her that. She had been careful, meticulous, invisible. But Charles had noticed. Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. Instead, she gave the safest answer she could. "To work, sir. To survive." Charles studied her a second longer before standing. "We'll see." And with that, he walked away, leaving Sophia alone in the vast dining room, her chest rising and falling with restrained emotion. Later that night, Oliver and Amelia sat in the family lounge, a massive room filled with leather sofas, golden frames, and the glow of a fireplace. Their anger had not softened. "She humiliated us," Amelia spat, her glass of wine trembling in her manicured hand. "In front of father." Oliver paced back and forth, his jaw clenched. He took her side. "Over us, over his own children." "She's dangerous," Amelia muttered. "She doesn't belong here." Oliver stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. "Then we'll make sure she doesn't stay." The fire crackled as their silent pact sealed. Sophia returned to her small room tucked away in the servants' quarters, barely large enough for a bed and a dresser. She sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at her hands. They still smelled faintly of garlic and herbs, but what lingered stronger was Charles Harrington's question. "Why are you really here?" Her secret weighed heavily, like a shadow pressing down on her chest. She had come to this house not only for survival, but for something more. Something that, if revealed, could destroy everything. She pulled open the drawer of her dresser. Inside was a faded photograph, a younger version of herself, standing beside a man with sharp eyes and a stern expression. Her father, the man who once worked for the Harrington family before being dismissed under mysterious circumstances. He had died shortly after, his reputation shattered, leaving Sophia to pick up the pieces. Her presence in this mansion was not a coincidence. It was a return. A reckoning she had never planned to reveal until tonight forced her hand. The following morning, Charles summoned Sophia to his office. The room was lined with dark wood shelves, leather-bound books, and a window that overlooked the sprawling estate. He sat behind his massive desk, fingers steepled, eyes sharp. "You interest me," he said without preamble. Sophia stood in the doorway, unsure if it was an invitation or a threat. "Sir, you carry yourself differently. You're not like the others on staff. You're not afraid." "I don't see the point in fear," she replied quietly. Charles raised a brow. Most people do. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then he leaned forward. "You will cook for this family tonight. A proper dinner. I want to see if last night was luck or truth." Sophia's pulse quickened, but she nodded. Yes, sir. As she turned to leave, Charles's voice followed her. And Sophia? She paused. Do not disappoint me. That evening, the Harringtons gathered again around the long mahogany table. Oliver and Amelia arrived reluctantly, their expressions sour. The tension in the air was palpable, every glance between them charged with unspoken hostility. Sophia entered carrying the first course, her steps steady despite the weight of the moment. She set down plates of roasted vegetables glazed with herbs, each dish meticulously prepared. The aroma filled the room, rich and inviting. Charles sampled first, his expression unreadable as he tasted. Then, slowly, he nodded. Better. Oliver muttered under his breath, "This is absurd." But even Amelia, despite her disdain, couldn't hide the flicker of curiosity when she tasted the dish. Her lips parted slightly, as if against her will. "It's edible," she admitted reluctantly. Sophia said nothing, only returned to the kitchen to prepare the next course. Course after course, she brought meals that told stories, recipes rooted in her past, flavors that carried memories of scarcity, resilience, and love. Each plate was both humble and profound, a contrast to the elaborate but soulless meals the Harringtons were accustomed to. By the time dessert arrived, a simple custard infused with vanilla, an uneasy silence had settled over the room. Oliver refused to eat more than a few bites, but Amelia had nearly finished her plate without realizing it. Charles leaned back in his chair, watching his children carefully. "Do you see?" he asked them, his tone sharp. "Do you understand the difference between food that feeds the body and food that feeds the soul?" Oliver pushed his plate away violently. "She's manipulating you, manipulating all of us." Sophia finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "No, I'm reminding you. Food is not a stage for arrogance. It's a bridge to survival. And survival humbles us all." Oliver stood abruptly, his face red with fury. "You don't belong here. You never will." But before Charles could respond, Sophia's eyes flicked to Oliver, steady and unwavering. "Maybe I don't belong in your world of glass towers and arrogance. But you'll soon learn that sometimes the invisible know more than the powerful." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. That night, after everyone retired, Charles found himself unable to sleep. He wandered into the kitchen, where Sophia was quietly washing dishes. For a moment, he simply watched her, trying to piece together the puzzle. Finally, he asked, "Why do I feel as though you've been waiting for this moment?" Sophia froze, her hands submerged in soapy water. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to answer, "Because I have." Charles stepped closer, his voice low, dangerous. "What are you hiding, Sophia?" Her heart pounded. For years, she had carried her secret alone, but now it teetered on the edge of revelation. "Ask yourself," she whispered, "what happened to the man who once worked for you? The man who vanished from this house in disgrace, leaving behind a daughter no one cared to remember." Charles's eyes darkened as the pieces began to fall into place. And in that moment, the Harrington mansion shifted from a palace of power to a house of ghosts, its walls heavy with secrets long buried but now stirring back to life. Charles's breath grew heavy, his jaw tightening as he pieced together Sophia's cryptic words. His mind rewound through decades of memories, back to the man he had once dismissed, Rafael Alvarez. A loyal worker, too loyal, until whispers of betrayal, theft, and dishonor forced Charles to cast him out. Or so he had believed. "You're his daughter," Charles muttered, his tone caught between disbelief and anger. Sophia turned slowly, drying her hands on her apron. Her eyes held no shame, only a quiet defiance. "Yes, Rafael Alvarez was my father. And I remember the day he left this house broken, accused of something he never did. I remember his silence, his despair, and his death." The kitchen air grew thick, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. Charles's face hardened, but inside, his empire of certainty began to crack. "You think he was innocent?" Charles asked, his voice low. "I know he was," Sophia answered without hesitation. "And you knew it too. But it was easier to sacrifice him than to confront the truth." Charles stared at her, but Sophia didn't flinch. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Finally, he said, "This is dangerous, what you're suggesting." "No, Mr. Harrington," Sophia whispered, stepping closer. "What's dangerous is raising children who believe the world owes them everything, who spit on food because they've never felt hunger. What's dangerous is forgetting the lives crushed beneath your fortune." The next morning, the Harrington estate seemed quieter, as though the house itself had absorbed the tension. Oliver and Amelia avoided Sophia's gaze whenever she entered the room, their arrogance bruised by the previous night's confrontation. But Charles watched her differently. Not with suspicion, not yet with trust, but with something in between. Curiosity laced with unease. At breakfast, he made an announcement that silenced the table. "From now on, Sophia will oversee the kitchen. She will prepare every meal served in this house." Oliver nearly choked on his coffee. "What? You can't be serious." Amelia set her glass down with a sharp clink. "You're humiliating us, Father. Putting a maid above the staff, above us. It's madness." Charles's eyes narrowed. "It's order. You will eat what she serves, or you will not eat at all." Oliver slammed his fist on the table. "You're letting her manipulate you. She's nothing." "Enough!" Charles's voice thundered, silencing even the air. His gaze cut to Oliver, cold and merciless. "You mistake privilege for strength. You mistake cruelty for power, and you will learn the difference." Sophia remained silent through it all, though inside her heart pounded. She had never sought power here, but now power was being forced into her hands, and with it came a risk she could no longer avoid. Days passed, and the mansion transformed in subtle ways. Meals were no longer extravagant displays of excess, but dishes that carried history, meaning, and soul. Charles ate everyone. Amelia resisted at first, but found herself finishing more often than not, though she never admitted why. Oliver, however, refused stubbornly, surviving on scraps of takeout he secretly ordered. The staff, once skeptical, began to look at Sophia differently. Respect replaced whispers. Some even smiled when she entered the room, as if her courage had shifted something in them too. But Oliver and Amelia's resentment deepened into something darker. Late one night, in the flicker of candlelight within the lounge, they whispered plans. "She's destroying everything," Amelia hissed. "Father listens to her more than to us. It's unbearable." Oliver's jaw tightened. "Then we'll finish what we started. She won't stay here. Not after tonight." Sophia knew something was coming. She had lived too long in silence not to sense the weight of danger in the air. That evening, as she prepared dinner, she moved with quiet precision, her thoughts racing. The time for truth was approaching. She cooked as if weaving her soul into each dish. Roasted chicken with herbs that reminded her of her mother's garden, bread baked golden and warm, vegetables seasoned with care. Every bite was more than food, it was testimony. When she carried the platters to the dining room, Oliver's eyes followed her like daggers. Amelia's lips curved into a cruel smile, but her eyes burned with venom. Dinner began in silence. Forks scraped against plates. The tension was unbearable. And then Oliver spoke. "You think you're clever," he sneered. "But we know who you are now. A fraud, a liar, a maid pretending to be more." Sophia set her spoon down gently. "No, I've never pretended. I only showed you what you refused to see." Amelia leaned forward, her voice sharp as glass. "You don't belong here. And soon you won't be here." Charles's eyes flicked between them, suspicion forming. "What are you two planning?" But before Oliver could respond, Sophia stood, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "I won't stay silent anymore." She reached into her apron and pulled out the photograph, the faded picture of her with Rafael Alvarez. She placed it on the table in front of Charles. "This was my father," she said, her voice breaking slightly, but growing stronger with each word. "The man you cast out, accused without proof, condemned to a death he didn't deserve. I came here not for revenge, but to face the truth you buried, and to remind your children that wealth without conscience is emptiness." The room fell into stunned silence. Amelia's face drained of color. Oliver's mouth opened, but no words came. Charles picked up the photograph, his hand trembling. His eyes lingered on the face of Rafael Alvarez, a ghost from his past. His throat tightened, memories clawing their way back. The dismissal, the accusations, the decision he made not out of justice, but out of convenience. For the first time in years, Charles Harrington felt shame. The silence shattered when Oliver shouted, his voice shaking with rage. "She's manipulating you. She's trying to destroy this family." But Charles slammed his fist on the table, his voice booming. "No, she's revealing what we've become." Amelia's eyes filled with tears, not of guilt, but of fear. Fear that the foundation of their privilege was cracking. Charles turned to them, his expression hard. "You refuse to eat because you think the world owes you delicacies. But Sophia has shown you more dignity in one meal than you've shown in your entire lives. And I will not allow this family to rot in arrogance any longer." Oliver's face twisted with fury. He stood abruptly, his chair crashing backward. "If she stays, I leave this house forever." Charles's gaze was cold, unwavering. "Then leave." The words hit like a blade. Oliver froze, disbelief etched into his face. Amelia gasped, her hands clutching the edge of the table. "Father, you can't," she began. "I can," Charles interrupted, his voice steady. "And I will, because this house will no longer be ruled by arrogance." That night, Oliver stormed out of the mansion, his pride greater than his hunger. Amelia remained, shaken, her defiance cracking, but not yet broken. Sophia sat in her small room, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She had revealed her truth, and in doing so, she had changed the balance of power in the Harrington estate forever. But she felt no triumph, only exhaustion, and the ache of her father's memory. Weeks passed, and slowly the Harrington mansion transformed. Meals became gatherings instead of battlegrounds. Charles sat at the table, not as a tyrant, but as a man learning to listen. Amelia, though reluctant, began to soften. One evening, she even asked Sophia how to prepare a dish, her voice quieter, almost curious. Oliver's absence lingered like a wound, but the house no longer echoed with empty arrogance. Sophia continued her work, not as just a maid, not as just a cook, but as a woman who had forced a family of privilege to face the truth. One evening, as the sun set behind the sprawling estate, Charles approached her in the kitchen. He held the faded photograph of Rafael Alvarez. "I can't undo what I did," he said, his voice heavy, "but I can honor him through you. Stay, Sophia, not as a servant, as the soul this house has been missing." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, but she nodded. Not for herself, not for power, but for her father. For the truth. And so, the Harrington mansion, once a fortress of arrogance, began to change. Slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. Because one woman, once invisible, dared to speak. Because one family, drowning in privilege, was forced to face the hunger of the soul. And because sometimes the most powerful revelations come not from wealth or titles, but from the courage of the unseen.